Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
Now, here's your host, Ed Cohen.
This is Ed in San Diego. It's 7 a.m. here, and amazing. It's just getting light out. So daylight time starts here next weekend. And of course, it'll get dark at 4:45. Craziness. So we all made it through Halloween. You know, I think it's the first time Halloween's been on 2 days, not just one. You know, so I was walking around Little Italy yesterday with Joanne, and people were in costumes. This was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't dare go out. I didn't want to scare anybody. So welcome, Daniel Cunningham. It's been a couple of years. We have Sara Simonetti from Interconnects, Marc Colo from findneurohelp.org. And we'll introduce the others when they get on. So Daniel, let's start with you. Tell us what you're doing and what your focus of involvement is these days.
Yeah, some things have changed for sure.
Well,
what
for
aren't we doing?
everybody, look at, I've gotten really white.
Yeah, myself as well. I used to have some black in this. Now it's all white again. Yeah, we have had an interesting couple years. You know, COVID definitely made some changes to business and how things are done in you know, moving and storage as well as transportation. I'm sure we all hear and see the things and feel the effects that are actually happening there. But you know, we I guess in May we sold the assets of CubeMonk, you know, to a company called Grip, and we're becoming, you know, part of something much larger. Ed, you know, with Asia, Europe, India, Australia, we have partners in all those countries now. So we're growing. Still don't intend to launch until April, but the technology has taken on kind of a form and life of its own when it comes to the transportation industry and the, you know, autonomous containers. So it's pretty cool to see that going. But we also made a lot of headway in our regenerative self-sustaining community side as well, which, you know, just working with different communities around the world, you know, to optimize and manage asset sharing and stuff like that. You know, just really trying to help them figure out, you know, how to keep their communities going and growing strong. You know, I don't know if you're aware, but in the intentional community world, you know, the two biggest things that put them out of business is, you know, the inability to attract funds or people who have resources enough to keep the community going, and conflict resolution. And we've designed architectural technology in the neuro side, you know, to assist with some of that. So it's two different tracks, two different worlds, you know, transportation, and then you have intentional communities, self-sustainability, but two beautiful tracks that I love to work on every day.
Hey, that's really a nice story. So intentional communities, what does that mean?
You're living, you know, from a place of love. You're not allowing your ego or objects, items, and things to define you, which is what we've been taught as a society. You know, whether it's the separation of religion, language, country, even education is a separation mechanism. And, you know, what we're working to do is trying to, you know, uneducate people, you know, so they can actually unlearn to relearn, unlearn who they were taught to be, to figure out within who they were meant to be.
Well, Sara, how have you reinvented yourself?
Wow, I really like that. That's a great, I was thinking about how we can all do that, and some of us find different vehicles within which to transform ourselves. And mine happened to be martial arts training. And so, and then you said something about education being a separator. And I thought, wow, yeah, definitely. You know, my experience was the same. And so, but, you know, you don't realize those things until you become an adult, and then you start going out into the world and figuring out who you are and, you know, what you want and what you don't want for yourself. And so I actually started martial arts training just as I graduated from my bachelor's in college. So I was a little bit late to not late, but, I wasn't a child when I started. So, and that was like actually intentional as well. I had always thought about doing it. But I knew that martial arts was something different than just like sort of going to the gym and running on a treadmill. I knew that there was a whole other aspect to it. And so I wanted to make sure that it was something. Actually, that's not true. I didn't know whether or not I would be able to stick it out, is the truth. When I started, I thought, well, I don't know if I'll be able to do this, but I'm going to give it a try. And it was kind of easy, actually. I went to my first class and I was like, oh, this is great. I love this. And all you have to do is make the decision to go sort of to the next class and everything, and participate and be present in that class, and everything else sort of takes care of itself. And so here I am 20 some odd years later, and I have class tonight, and I managed to weave into my day other things that grew out of or became refined by the martial arts practice, which is, meditation and just sort of awareness and mindfulness and things like that. So that's a really great thing. I love that intention. It's a very intentional community. Our martial arts community is very intentional. You decide every day that you're going to get up and be a certain person, or, take certain actions. And so I really love that. I'm going to definitely follow up with you after this to learn more. So
Every breath, Sarah, every breath.
Indeed.
It's every day is a new day, and we decide how we want to feel.
Absolutely. That is
So we have
true.
the chat thing on the bottom. If you look on the bottom there, you see chat. Why don't
Yes.
you give us, everybody, your website or your email that you want us to use? Okay. And then we could further all this. Marc Colo, really busy guy for being in retirement. And what's happening with you today? I know you have to jump off in a little bit.
You sound like my wife, Ed.
Uh-oh.
Little too busy. Start to turn it off when you start learning things. It's every day is a new day for me. I'm not quite the same person I was yesterday, and won't be the same person tomorrow. So life changes. I've kind of, as I've rolled with the punches, I think I've learned little pearls of wisdom. That's an interesting conversation we're going to have here today, Ed. It's so diverse. Everyone's got different backgrounds and going different directions, and I love that little tidbits about Eastern religion and kind of mindset and preparing for. I'm fascinated at different religions. I love studying religions. But I just been busy with the foundation, trying to get that going. We've had it in business now for 5 years. We've had 4 successful golf tournaments and a number of other successful events. But we're still trying to find that big investor that says, hey, I like what you're doing. I like what you think. I want to help you get to that next level. And I'm not quite a Michael J. Fox. I don't quite have his deep pockets, but I do have some good friends I've made along the way that are pretty influential in my category, which is Parkinson's. I've got
Good. Thank you.
I got my 5 credos. I'll maybe share those later, Ed.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce a new friend, Lee, in London. Hello, Lee. Welcome.
Hello, Ed. Thank you very much. And apologies, I was slightly late. Our clocks have in fact gone back over here.
Yeah, I know. In fact,
So
I
it's
got
not 3,
a
it's 2 now.
message from a gal in Zurich who alerted me that Zurich, they lost an hour. So,
Yeah, I know. We got an extra hour in bed, I think, but there we go.
yeah. So this is Lee in London, and I want to quickly introduce Sara in New York, and we're going to go deeper, of course. Daniel's in Pennsylvania. Have you ever been in Pennsylvania, Lee?
No, I haven't.
Well, but we're going to make friends here so we can go forward together.
Yeah.
And you just heard from Marc Colo in Southern California, although it looks like Switzerland. So Lee McIntyre Hamilton is an attorney and an expert in tax and immigration law, particularly vis-a-vis U.S., UK stuff. Is that right? Did I say that correctly?
Yeah, pretty much, Ed. Although before the regulators pounce on me, I better make clear I'm not an attorney, but I work for attorneys as a tax advisor. But I don't care about the distinction, but some people do. But yeah, that's pretty much right. I specialize in what we call global mobility tax, so employers moving people around the world. But I have a specific focus on the UK market and have done for over 20 years.
Yeah, and I just want to announce that in late February, Lee and I are producing a seminar, webinar that, why don't you talk 30 seconds about that, and we'll do a deeper dive later.
Yeah, for sure. Just an overview. The world, as everyone knows, came to a halt with regards to mobility pretty much 18 months ago. And now things are opening back up again in the US and in many other countries, thankfully. And so what we wanted to do really is get back on the agenda, the whole, what do I do if I'm sat in HR and I need to relocate people from one country to another? And when I started out in this game, it was the domain of the big players. I was originally with PwC, and I was working with Bank of America and Citigroup and so on. But nowadays, you can get a 5-person company on the West Coast who's going to relocate 2 people to London. So we're aiming at that market of people who don't necessarily have the kind of expertise internally, and who just want to understand, what do I need to do when if I'm wanting to set up in business in the UK or indeed any other country.
Okay, and let me quickly introduce Daniel Cunningham. As I said, is in York, PA, Pennsylvania, which is near closer to Baltimore than it is to Pittsburgh. But Daniel is an expert in the transportation industry, is an investor, and also very much into what we've come to discuss today as intentional stuff. What is intentional, Daniel?
It's what you actually decide, not your subconscious. It's what you creatively, bring to the world, through conscious thinking. So it's intent, using your will versus education or epigenetics.
Okay, and Sara is also mentioned that she's been intentional in the transportation business for many years, but also in martial arts. And Mark has been in the transportation industry all his life until about a year ago, and took early retirement.
Yeah, it's about a year now.
But now he's full-time. He's a founder, Lee, co-founder of a group called FindNeuroHelp.org.
Okay.
And it has to do not only with his own affliction from Parkinson's for several years, but how he is successfully managing his life. And we're doing some PR things together extensively. And that has led to the launch, talking about intentional, I'll get to me in a minute, but I've launched with his help and guidance, medical TV talk shows, which is a series of interviews with leading scientists, researchers, and doctors, not only about the vaccine, but also about MS, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, ALS, Alzheimer's, and we have some fascinating conversations with leading researchers, doctors. But the cool thing, Mark, is that they're so smart, they're able to talk to me in English. And so my audience tunes in, they don't run away. So this show, let's talk about the show for a second. I started it about a year ago, not about being intentional at all, but just trying to find sponsors to help me pay some bills. And so I thought, well, this idea of doing good or doing better, and everyone's dealing with COVID at the time and trying to figure themselves out. So I've been in constant reinvention mode for a long time, but it really doubled down this past year. And so I came up with the slogan of become, in small letters and then big letters, a global voice for change with the number 4, for change. And what does that mean? Well, we've just heard some examples about how we can be intentional and how we can change things. So one of the slogans that a guy from London, as a matter of fact, gave me a couple of years ago, Mike Ilya, who's a business consultant, he came up with 2 questions. Well, just one basic question, but with 2 different angles. And this is aimed at the corporate, not at me or a service provider. His question is to the corporate: how can you make a global assignment more beneficial, ... for the company? In other words, measuring ROI. And what does that mean? And ... for the transferee. Is it going to be a waste of time for the transferee? Are they actually going to learn something new that they can be promoted using this new skill set and onward? But now, with the cutback in relocations and now the beginning of I wouldn't call it resurging of relocation, but certainly it's picking up. Is it going to be any differently? What do you think?
Well, I think it will be different. I think the whole idea of the traditional secondment, people moving from one country to another, that's been in hybrid mode, I think, since 2008, largely through cost. When we had the world financial crisis, I think organizations looked at mobility and said, actually, this is a huge cost, and that forces and concentrates people to think, do we need this? And if so, can we rationalize it, etc. So that led to a number of changes. One of the big changes was the reduction in the rate of what we'd call tax equalization, something that I think started in the US many years ago. And it was basically, if you're going overseas, as a company, we're going to keep you no better or worse off from a tax point of view. And that appealed to lots of Americans because actually often tax rates are higher overseas, but also Americans uniquely are taxed on their worldwide income, irrespective of how long they go overseas. So the incidence of that reduced, and just the incidence of assignments generally. But then I think zooming forward a little bit to the last 18 months, 2 years, and what's really had a kickstart is this whole idea of, well, actually, I can do my job from Bermuda or Italy or France. And indeed, in my old firm, which I was with last year, we had somebody who did their job from Mauritius for a whole 3 months for personal reasons, but nobody knew. She had a backdrop like everyone else. She was in London next door, as far as we knew. And so I think there's been an awakening by employees globally that, wow, this is a possibility. Secondly, I think employers are looking at it, at least some employers are looking at it not as a threat, but as perhaps we can reduce overhead here, or perhaps we can tap into new talent. Why do we have to get the individual who's great at medicine it's in Pennsylvania to come to the UK? Why can't they do that in Pennsylvania? So that's become a new area of mobility where it's not about relocation on a temporary basis. It's about going to live in another country on a permanent basis. And for me, that's an exciting change. It's not just tax, but the whole infrastructure around making that happen and work from a tax legal point of view, but also an HR point of view is I find very interesting.
Yeah. So Daniel, you lived for a while in Turkey area, right?
Yeah, I spend 3 or 4 months a year in Turkey, between Turkey and the Ukraine. Yeah. So I understand, the moving, the taxes, and he's absolutely correct. what I see in what he mentioned was the increase in efficiencies from people working from home. I think that employers are starting to see that. The other thing that we're seeing a lot of in what we're doing with, basically autonomous container moves is, the lump sum side has increased tremendously over the past 2 years, where, it's not, I think the corp reload packages and everything are going to change, and they're going to change drastically, where it's going to go more into the lump sum side. I mean, that's kind of the trend that we're seeing.
Yeah. Sarah, what do you think? Is that
Mm.
going to impact your business?
Yeah, so if I could, I wanted to just go back to something off of what Lee was saying, and then I'll try to tie in a little bit of the operational, moving aspect as well. But as Lee was speaking, I thought about back to one of the meetings that we had pre-pandemic, and I think there was a hesitance for corporate people to move certain people to certain places and so forth, and we were nowhere near a pandemic at that time, but people still thinking about a global passport or a global tax infrastructure. And so all of these things that would make our job more easy and be more conducive to global mobility. And even then I had a thought about how we're sort of moving toward that, toward a sort of centralized global database where visas and passports and tax are all tied into one document or one ID or one blockchain or one whatever it's going to be. One thumbprint, I guess, is my idea of this sort of virtual situation. And then the whole pandemic happened, and where people thought maybe remote work before wouldn't work, or they didn't know how, then obviously necessity brought us to invention, and we've made it work. And to Daniel's point, people are, I would say, more efficient because you don't have your commute, and you can sort of work anytime during, if your position allows for it, or if your role allows for it, you can work at any time during the day that's convenient for you, childcare and all of these other things, or adult care, elderly care, whatever might fit into your personal structure. But I don't want to ignore the future, right? So just the other day, Facebook changed its name. The parent company of Facebook changed its name to Meta, right? So those people are sort of light years beyond thinking about moving physical objects, which is where we are right now, right? Where I am, my role is to help people move their stuff from one place to another. Here we have a sort of inversion of that, where like people's essence, or whatever you want to call it, is going to be transported, into this virtual place. So one other thing I just wanted to mention, where there are roles that people can do remotely. Doesn't matter if they're in Mauritius or if they're in Bermuda, it doesn't matter. But there are other roles that obviously, any sort of, research and development in the lab is, or, mining or manufacturing and retail. And so there are things that will never, I won't say never, but more than likely not be conducive to, a remote situation, but there are many that will. And so I think we need to start thinking sort of leaping ahead to that idea of no longer are we moving people physically from one place to another, but now we're going to be moving them virtually from one place to another, where we would make the argument, having a business meeting through Zoom is not the same as being in this, is not the same as being in the same room with people, being physically present with them. But what if, right? Like, what if they get this matrix virtual thing to feel so real, this virtual reality? Like, what if they get it to feel so real that it does feel like we're all sitting in the same room together? And then what's happening? Are people, are they in another place, or are they still, in their root place? Are they in their virtual place? Are they in their remote place? So just something to think about, because we're talking about sort of what's happening today, but there are people who are talking about what's happening tomorrow already. Yeah. So just something to think about.
And
Mark? Yes, go ahead.
Can I come
Yes.
back on that, Ed? Is that okay?
Yes, Lee, and then Mark. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point, Sarah. You know, it's, I do think it's light years away, but probably closer than we think. And it's an interesting one for me, particularly because, you know, tax has been built globally on the basis of where you are situated, whether you're a company or an individual, are taxed predominantly. There are exceptions, but where you physically are. But to be in a world where you're potentially taxed where you're virtually situated, I think it would be a whole new order. It would completely change everything. I do think it's, you know, we have some precedents in terms of the world aligning when it comes to tax. We have a double tax treaty network between most Western countries, developed countries, which under which people have agreed some common principles. And, you know, it's the reason that whether you're a business visitor going to France for 2 weeks or a business visitor coming to the UK, as a US national, you're exempt in both countries under the US treaty with those countries, you know, so there's some commonality. I think the big challenge, though, just picking up your point, Sarah, is one, every country likes to have its own system, rules, and power to set those. And I think aligning those globally will be so tough, I think. But the second thing is this whole principle around being taxed where you physically are, I think is grounded in some common sense, in so much as you're paying for the services immediately around you, whether that be defense or this health service or whatever else you're accessing physically. And I think to change that into something virtual is possibly going to lead to, you know, it's going to need a whole rethink about, you know, globally how we fund services. But I love the thinking, though. It's great.
Mark Colo.
Hey, Lee, when I hear you talking about that, you know, about tax, my eyes just kind of gloss over and I kind of start wanting to take a nap or something. Taxation was always a tough
I'm
subject for
sorry
me.
about that. Am I?
No, that's okay. It's okay. I forgive you. And I heard Sarah talking. I thought, I went wondering to myself if she's a Trekkie. I mean, I'm thinking she's going to beam me up or something, you know. Yeah, that's what came to mind. And who knows? Maybe that will be the future, you know.
Yeah.
But I think we all have to be able to think again and rethink our thoughts, because things will happen for sure in the future that we're not going to expect, and we're going to have to adapt to it. It's kind of like COVID, you know. I mean, who thought we'd be so remote and mobile? And yet that's a protective measurement in some ways, protective procedure. So anyway,
So let's look at Captain Kirk here for a second. Okay? You know, he's 90 years old and he goes into space. I mean, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, even if it's only like a rocket ship ride for 20 minutes or whatever, he still did it. You know, that's cool. And looking back at the Earth from up there, Daniel, this is right in your ballpark, isn't it? I mean, what that guy was saying when he came back down, he was trying to be philosophical, but he was saying that, hey, people, we got to smarten up here and take care of things. Something like that, right, Daniel?
Yeah, we do. We have to actually be more conscious about what we're doing to the world and, you know, what it means, you know, for people in the U.S. My particular view is the education structure here is in such a way that most people aren't aware of what's happening in the world, or that most of the world's making less than $2 a month or per day, you know, and we're just not educated to those realities. And I think that some of those things need to change. But yeah, I mean, we're spinning on a rock in the middle of nothing. So really what matters, you know, what is so important or so stressful to people.
Hi, this is Ed, and I thank you for tuning in to Global TV Talk Show, a unit on globalbusinessnews.net. We broadcast to the world, as you know by now. So I wanted to make sure that you understand that our programs are advertising supported. We're grateful for co-sponsors, advertisers. They have a marketing budget coupled with a strong desire to be associated with our top quality program. And of course, I'm grateful. Thank you. So for the next few minutes, you're going to see some commercials. It's mostly very low key, and our prices are very, very reasonable. Our exposure for the advertisers go 12 months and beyond. Some of our advertisers have been with us since March, April of 2020. And Google Analytics has tracked over 125,000 what they call audience page views, which means you looking at this page, that's a page view. Now, if you happen to go to one of our other shows or to our radio broadcasts or to our newspaper or magazine, those become additional page views as measured by Google Analytics. And so when they say 125,000 since spring of 2020 up through Labor Day, a month ago, that's pretty good numbers. And the past 30 days, Google Analytics has measured just under 6,000 audience page views. And that, according to them, is a 42% increase in audience participation over the month of August. So thank you very much. Well, here's our advertisers, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes or so, and we'll proceed with this interesting conversation. Thank you.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we are researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
Hey, Lee, can I ask you a question? And you
For
could
sure.
just redirect this if you think it's off the wall.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so let's talk about President Biden and the whole. This is not political. It's just about tax, actually. So, in my view, trying to pay for all these social welfare programs. I mean, the U.S. is not going socialistic, but certainly they're going to do more for people, one way or another. And the time has come, in my view. But how to pay for it is another. That's a big question.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of non-positive conflict out there, and all because of who's going to pay for all this stuff.
Yeah.
And, okay, so, and the Democrats are saying, well, it's because of the funny accounting system, they're moving money around. So a lot of it's already going to be covered, and what are you worried about? So my view, and I'm not a tax guy at all, and is that the rich people, quote unquote, the rich people like Mark Colo and others, they're going to spend money no matter what, right? And the more they spend, the more tax they're going to pay if we have a value add tax, okay? Like a sales tax on everything, except maybe medicines and food. But why have an income tax? People are going to keep spending and spending. So just tax what people spend on. The rich are going to pay far more in taxes than me. What do you think?
Well, I think actually it's linked to the point Daniel was making about the climate, and I think just standing back from everything. I mean, my view on it is, and not straying too much into the politics, but we went through the post-war period, and then into the 70s, and then 80s with Reagan on your side, Thatcher on ours, and I think the Western world embraced this idea of individualism and business and making money. And I think we lost somewhere in that a collective sense of what's right and wrong globally for the planet, for our fellow human beings, for the services around us. And what that's led to, I think, is a very a reluctance to pay tax. It's a begrudging thing, and nobody likes paying tax, but just a loss of what it's actually there for. So I think that's the first thing, and I think the reality is that we're on the pendulum swinging back slowly. And I think there's a growing awakening around the planet, other people. I think the pandemic has helped with that, and I think that's a good thing, in many respects. I think the second thing is with regards to rich people, and it's hard. How do you find who's rich and who's not? I mean, somebody in this country who's working in a local store is rich compared to somebody who's eking out $6 a week in a Eastern African country, and so it's all relative. But the thing about tax and rich is that I think it's always a myth when I've looked at this stuff that you can increase taxes on the rich, as however you define that, and expect that to pay for everything. The reality is you've got to do one or two things. You've got to make your services more cost effective, or the overall tax take has to go up, and that means everybody paying a bit more. And that's the bit I think governments hitherto have been reluctant to do. Very quickly, final point, in the UK, and hence my point around the pendulum coming back, our government, which is a right-wing government, it's a Tory government, Conservative government, it has for the first time broken the mold. And I mean, our tax, we're paying more now than we were doing like 40 years ago. I mean, our tax rate is extremely high now when you look at all the taxes together, partly to pay for the pandemic, but also to invest in crumbling infrastructure, a health service that doesn't work anymore, etc. And I think so far they're getting away with it. People are accepting it, and I think we're going to see more of that.
Sarah?
Yeah, good point about the crumbling infrastructure, because I think people forget that aspect of it, how it affects us on our daily, in our daily living. And I just had a thought about how the humanity is a little bit gone, and hopefully, Lee, you're right. I feel sorry for the younger generations, because I feel like we're definitely not leaving them a planet that's better than what we inherited. And, now it's unfortunately going to be up to them, to kind of fix it, which is not right. If you had 10 people in a room, right, each of them at their own, economic level, if you had 10 people in a room and you had to look 9 other people in the face, right, and you knew that 4 out of those 10 people were lacking, you would probably help those 4 people out. I think unfortunately, we live in a society where it's hard to humanize people anymore, and I think that's a little bit of the problem. And I think just coming back to the idea of religion, which I don't like to use that word very much, but the purpose of that was to humanize people. And I think we've kind of lost that. And you don't need to be religious, right, to be a humanist. And, that's a kind of overarching big sort of idea, again, but it happens, on our daily lives. So, going back to the infrastructure, I think those are things that need to be addressed, and quickly, because we don't have time. We feel like we have this luxury of time. And no amount of money, unfortunately, is going to fix some of the stuff that we've done. So we really need to act swiftly, quickly. Another thing is, I think that I wish that we would do as much research about what happens, just as consumerism, just as an idea of consumerism, and sort of what brought us to where we are now is, I wish people would spend as much time thinking about what's going to happen to the item that they purchase after they purchase it as they do before they purchase it. So we've got all this Amazon structure in place, and eBay and all this stuff for before we purchase something. And we give nary a thought about what happens to that item after we purchase it. And I think we need to start thinking about that. I think we need to start thinking about, does it come wrapped in plastic with, filler in a box, and like all of these things? Is it going to be recyclable? Is it something that can be reused? Is it something that can be upcycled? Like, we don't think anything about what we're going to do with that item, after we purchase it. But we spend an inordinate amount of time thinking about it before that happens. So I think we need to start re-educating ourselves. I wish we could go into a whole other topic about thoughts and processes and neural and how you can retrain your brain. I wish we could had time for that. Maybe we can do that another time. But I think consumerism is a big problem. I think it's our biggest problem. And I think we don't really talk about it, but yeah, we need to start thinking about what's happening to the stuff that we purchase after we purchase it.
All right.
My soapbox. I'm getting off the soapbox.
So I don't think we're going to let you get off. But
okay.
All right. So I want you to look at your calendars. December 1 is a Wednesday, 30 days from now. And let's come back on this topic and revisit, because we have about 8 minutes remaining here. Just to bring focus, Daniel, I think you've got to say something real quick here about what your chat message just was about the root cause. Why don't you give us a quick primer on what you think the root cause is?
We've become a society that's healing or trying to heal the symptoms of everything. I mean, to me, greed is a massive problem for the world. And, something that you mentioned, Sarah, about, purchasing, we become just a replace it society, not repair it or fix it, which is changing some in Europe. There's some cafes that are opening up that are actually repair cafes. We've come to the point where we're making things so they only last a year or two in order to keep spending going, which has to change. We have to reverse that thinking. I'm a part of a group called CircularityEdge.com. So we work with governments in major cities in Aruba, in Colombia, Medellin, in Canada, for circular approach and circular economy. Because you're right, from cradle to grave, you should know where things originate from and where they're going to go after the fact. We become a society to where it ends up in our oceans and landfills, and nobody's looking. People just turning their head because it's a infrastructure problem, but more importantly, it's a bottom line dollars problem, and it shouldn't be about the dollars. It should be about the human and the experience that we have, and as a society, we need to find ways to handle some of these things. And we work with quite a few teams, and I'd love Sarah to catch up on some of that neuro stuff that you were talking about, because we're working down that line. We're looking at the geometry of 9. We're looking at patterns of real history, not what we've been taught history to be. We're looking at spiral dynamics. We're looking at these things, and we're building out machine learning algorithms that are based on nature's laws versus man's laws or man's ability to manipulate data.
Okay, let's talk with Marc Colo, because he's got to run also, Daniel. Marc, again, the charity is called findneurohelp.org. Go check it out. It's fascinating. Marc, what you're doing is helping people who have not just the disease, but people who are impacted by people who have the disease, right?
Yeah, it's all intertwined. You start talking neuro and I could talk forever. I mean, it's just, I've learned so much in the last 15 years since I was diagnosed. And I remember that day clearly and vividly, the day I was diagnosed, because it was one of the hardest days of my life. I was an athlete. I was a good athlete in all sports. I had a pretty bright mind. I felt like I had the tiger by the tail at the time. And then you go to see your general, and then they refer you to a specialist, and that's usually a 3 months wait. And so your mind is doing little tricks and somersaults during that time. And then they invite you into your appointment, and they have you do a few exercises, which I think are totally irrelevant to your being there. I thought I was in the wrong office. And then they say, okay, Marc, would you please sit down? And I said, sure. And that can't be good news when they say, please take a seat. So I took a seat, thankfully. And he gave me the verdict. He says, I think your symptoms are pre-Parkinsonian. And the good thing about ignorance is bliss, because I didn't know that much about what Parkinson's entailed. But had I known that, I don't know if I ever would have made it out of the doctor's room. I mean, it was just such a shock, overwhelming shock. But everything is tied into your neuro. There's so much tied into just your nerves and how they operate, how they function. And I just have one fault in my system, and that's that my cells that produce dopamine no longer produce the quantity that I need. And that's why I do this trembling and this shaking. And yeah, it's unnerving. It's uncomfortable. It's not what I'd want. I don't want to be a center of attraction ever. But it's what I have. And it's what I've learned over the last, I'd say, again, 15 years. I've learned so many lessons that I couldn't have learned any other way had I not been through this. So it's not all things are bad that look bad. Some things can become very good and can become very pearls of wisdom that you can hang on to. So I don't have time today for my 5 credos, but those are some of the lessons I've learned in life. And maybe I'll share those on the next show or on the December 1st show, Ed.
Yeah, and on December 6th, Mark has invited to our medical TV show a doctor. Who is this doctor? What is he famous for?
His name is Albert Laspada, and he's an expert in neurology in general. And I think he has some background in infectious diseases as well, but he's just a bright guy. He's the kind of guy that's going to be the Nobel Prize winner, or he's going to be the guy that's going to cure some of these diseases that we have in neurology. There's about 5,000 diseases in neurology. So I happen to have the 3rd most debilitating one. Number 1 is Alzheimer's because of the dementia factor to that. So there's some tough ones out there, but you can get through it.
So in Alzheimer's, regarding dementia, now my dad died when he was 86, and the last 3 years, he had no idea who I was, and he didn't know who Mom was either. So, I mean, it's kind of weird. And then Joanne's mom got afflicted in a bad way, serious, when she was about 70. And she lived until she was 95.
Wow.
But, I mean, it was just, in a home, put away, really, because she just couldn't deal with anything. So, I'm afraid I'm going to be impacted by all this stuff, or Joanne will. And I'm learning from you and watching you live as much as I can. So you're an inspiration, Mark, and thanks for introducing me to findneurohealth.org.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. I have to run, you guys.
Yeah,
Great to speak to you. Cheers, Mark.
Take care. Take care.
Bye, Mark. Thank you.
Bye.
So Daniel, I know you got to go soon too, and I very much want to continue our conversation about what you're doing, but also about business and you getting more involved in our talk shows, like we originally planned. And so, Lee, the series of talk shows that you and I are going to be doing, and of course the seminar in late February, but coming up, we're going to be doing some talk shows about the different aspects of US, UK.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, focusing on a little bit around what I do, but I'm really interested in the broader themes as well. The cultural differences of doing work in the US and vice versa as UK, US nationals. I'm interested in those aspects as well, but also just the human aspects of negotiating and navigating something different. And I think that's what every HR person faces when they have this challenge. They have organizational pressure to do what's right in a cost-efficient way. They have pressure from the individuals who are being seconded. And often these things are complex. They're not intuitive. So I'm interested in exploring all those kind of things. But more than anything, and this has been my lifelong thing with the advice that I do, is to try and make things simple and straightforward for people. It's not always possible, but I think too often when we hear technical people speak, it's not intelligible. And I think I don't always get it right, by the way, but it's the thing I strive for, is to make it simple for people to understand.
Thank you, Lee. I'm glad that we could meet up and do some things together. Sara, it's wonderful to see you again, and I really welcome you to come back more often.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and it was
thank you,
meeting you, Lee. Yeah,
and yourself, Sara. Yeah, no, great, and thanks for putting this on, Ed. It's been a joy.
Yeah. Okay, we'll talk soon. Okay. I'm
Thanks,
in San Diego. You're
Cheers,
in New York.
guys.
He's in London.
Have a great
That's
day.
Great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Cheers.
Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.